Welcome to the Coming Home Well podcast, the show that educates, supports, and advocates for the veteran community. Your host, Dr. Tyler Pieron, U.S. Army retired, will bring you exciting conversations with amazing guests about resources, research, and military history, all geared to helping our warriors to come home well. Here's your host, Dr. Tyler Pieron.
Welcome back to Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Tyler Pieron, and today we're going to have a really fascinating discussion with Drew LaBoon, who is a veteran and has served in some amazing things, but he didn't really come home well. He had some challenges, but I'm not really equipped to tell his story, so we have Drew here. Drew is with a great organization. It's called Warrior's Heart, and the story about how he got there is fascinating to me. Drew, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
So you were in the military. What did you do?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of everything. You know, it's generally my standard answer.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, well, the idea in special operations, right, is we're jack of all trades. I originally started in the infantry, 175 infantry specifically. Joined the Army when I was 17 years old.
Me too.
Anxious to punch out and do great things for God and country, and I wanted to be, that guy on the poster. I was the classic. The recruiters got me. You want to be that cool guy on the poster in the video. Here we go. And so I originally, joined the infantry and just loved it. But, I am, as a person in long-term recovery, right, to fast forward and then to back up, we say that I was an alcoholic long before I was an alcoholic. And what I mean by that is I was never satisfied where I was. I would work really hard to get to a certain place, right? Get to Ranger Regiment, get to different areas of special operations, but it was never enough where I was, right? I always wanted to be that next step further. And so I started looking at a lot of different tracks in the Army on how to do bigger and better things. And Iraq, Afghanistan had already kicked off. I'd already participated in that. Iraq was kicking off, and I wanted to get out in the fight faster and be more involved. And so I left and went to Fort Bragg, originally with the Q course, and that didn't work out health-wise. I was a heat casualty. In the 18 Bravo course, our final FTX, and I was a heat casualty, and that the rule back then is you had to wait until summer to go back through again. And like I said, Iraq had just kicked off, and I was not sitting around for a year to wait. So I walked down the road to the psychological operations recruiters, and those guys kind of play catch out there at the Q course for anybody that, for whatever reason, it's not working out. And so I left and went over there. I went through the psychological operations, their version of their qualification course, and got to the PSYOPS regiment. And originally I was doing it to hurry up and get in the fight, but it ended up being the best career move I could have made. It was perfect for me. I got to spend time and go down range with all different branches, special operations, all different tier units. I spent the majority of my time in naval special warfare. So spent years supporting different elements under the naval special warfare umbrella, and I absolutely loved it. Going a million miles an hour, supporting all those operations in various countries, and I just couldn't get enough. I was built.
And that's an unusual thing for an Army guy to go do.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. Not so much in the special operations umbrella, particularly in the psychological operations world. The PSYOPS regiment has, we've got guys, psychological operators in every unit under the Department of Defense umbrella. So I loved it though. I fit in well with those guys. I always knew my job. I went in with those elements and those units, knowing my role and what I was there to do. And I did my job well, and I loved it. And I was built for war, man. I loved deploying. I loved being in the fight. It got to the point, this weird thing started to happen for me though, was I got to the point where I was more comfortable in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in other countries than I was at home.
I know a lot
Um,
of guys that were that way who just really loved deploying, especially early parts of the war. Afghanistan 02, 03, Iraq 03, 04, 05. And then as it got more regimented, more MPs giving out speeding tickets for speeding on base and crap like that, it's less fun. But the further away from the flagpole you
sure.
get, the better.
Well, and depending on what you're doing and who you're working with, you could be right under the flagpole and pretty far away from it.
Hmm.
I remember the closest I ever got. I remember thinking, uh, this is this war is crazy. I remember I was in Bagram and I was cruising down Disney. I'd gotten back to Bagram to refill my op fund bag or something. I don't my money bag. I don't remember exactly what reason. And I'm cruising down to go get like a milkshake or something down at their fancy PX area. And some um, some MPs came up and asked me where my reflective belt is. And I was like, what? Like I'm dirty. I've got a pistol on me. I'm walking down to get a milkshake, and they were like, "You've got to have a reflective belt to to be here." And I was like, "Well, I don't even own. Well, I think I probably do back at Fort Bragg, but I don't even own a reflective belt. Like, who brings that to war?" And I remember thinking then, man, like we're gonna be here a while. That
Hmm.
was in 2008, 2009 timeframe. Iraq or Afghanistan was starting to get fun again along that, right around there, 2009,
Yeah, that's when
2011.
Iraq was starting to wind down and Afghanistan was
Yeah.
ramping up, and nobody called that. That
Yeah.
was very unusual.
Well, and so I spent most of my time, kind of out in the middle of nowhere or, doing fly-in operations where we're in for a few hours out. And I absolutely loved it. When I talk about, I remember this shift happened. My first couple deployments, I would get anxious and nervous before the deployment, right? We're going off, we're going to war again. But this shift happened to where I was anxious and nervous coming home.
Hmm.
Um, and then I was uncomfortable at home and I was ready to go back to war. And I think that's pretty common, especially with guys that were in. I had a 17-year special operations career. And so much of my time um, was spent, the majority of my adulthood was spent at war preparing to go to war. And
Hmm.
so that's all I knew from age 17 until I had a couple weird things happen. Like I've been, blown up twice, and I've been, had a lot of overpressure, shoulder fire rockets, demo charges, different things like that. And I started to have this seizure disorder that developed. It wasn't diagnosed properly at first. I would go into this because I have a traumatic brain injury, and so I would go into this fugue state, right? And this gets into the good stuff of not coming home well. Is I would go into this fugue state with my traumatic brain injury where I don't have grand mal seizures, I have petit mal. So I have so many protein deposits on my brain that the synapses in my brain will try to fire, and it's like a traffic jam because they can't get to where they're going, and my brain tries to reset. And so I would go into this state where I'm super confused. I don't know who I am. I don't know
Wow.
where I am. And that started to happen. And, understandably,
Freaking out.
yeah, the special operations world's like, yeah, you can't stay here, man. You can't carry guns. You can't do what we're expecting you to do. It's not, you can't have a clearance doing that. If you go into periods of, so I started the medical retirement process at 17 years. And um, I thought I knew what I was going to go do. I think like so many guys, I had a pretty good plan, I thought. Uh,
Hmm.
I didn't think anything was really wrong with me, you know. But I went from the spear tip of freedom to I remember um, the most alone I felt. One of the most alone times I've ever felt in my life is I'm going through the PCS process, um, or I'm going through the retirement process, and I get to the very end part where I'm signing a DD 214, And the civilian hands me a flag in a cardboard box and says, "Best of luck to you." And I remember sitting there going, "That's it?" Like, I didn't
Very
want to.
anticlimactic, isn't it?
Well, I wasn't asking for a parade. I didn't need, the ticker tape where I'm hoisted on people's shoulders. I didn't deserve that. But geez, that was it. And
Yeah.
so,
And with the medical
and
retirement, you don't know exactly what day that's going to happen.
nope.
Yeah, you get
I,
like
I,
30 days notice, like, oh, you're gone as of this day. Good luck.
yeah,
It's not
well,
like
and I'm
6 months or a year, like you have a rough timeline, but when you're doing the medical retirement, from the time they make a decision, it's pretty abrupt.
Well, and I was in and out of surgeries. They're trying to put me back together. That last little bit, I had 4 elbow surgeries because one of the times I got blown up. I got blown off a rooftop. A recoilless rifle round struck a building, got blown off a rooftop, and elbow surgeries. They're trying to fix my neck. They're trying to figure out if something's wrong with my brain. And all the while, I had been at home for almost a year, like 10 months was the longest I had been home with my head on my pillow in over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was really like, I was not well. I was so anxious. It was like constantly my brain's eating my face. I'm drinking more and more. I'm on and off narcotics through all my surgeries. And I've got complex post traumatic stress that needs an outlet and can't find one. And
Hmm.
so I'm drinking more and more. I'm abusing my pain medications. I would eat through a 30-day prescription in less than a week, and I'd call my surgeon like, "Hey, man, I got a lot of breakthrough pain," and they'd write me another 30-day script. And so then I retire, and I had a pretty good job lined up. I was going to go in and do some executive protection, some defense contracting, that type stuff. Because I'd done a little bit of dabbled in some of the source handling and been involved in a lot of that. And so I had a lot of opportunities in the defense contracting sector and private security. And so I got out and started doing that. But as I was going through the retirement process, I quickly, within a couple of weeks, I was drinking around the clock.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
because again, from age 17 until age 33, that's all I knew was the military at war, prepared for war. And so that's when I went to my first treatment episode. I had my wife at the time was uh, she was an Army officer, and so she helped find some resources, worked with my command, who, I mean, I never had an alcohol related incident. It wasn't for lack of trying. It was just because there was always somebody there to catch my fall, or, in special operation. I never had any major scripts. I never had DUIs or anything, but, we get in
Yeah, there's a
trouble or
lot of
drink.
times if, but by the grace of God, right? Somebody's
Yeah.
looking out and didn't get caught, or somebody helped and said, "Hey, you need to do this instead."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm quickly, so I end up at my first treatment center, and
How long after you retired did this happen?
3 months.
Yeah, that's pretty significant. That's pretty quick, but it was accelerating and then just got because you're already getting treatment. It wasn't just like you retired and it happened. You're headed that way as you're going through the medical retirement process, but it really goes back probably years, right?
Right. Well, and I was always a hard drinker, right? But I never, when we would go drinking, we would party, I would drink till blackout for sure. But it wasn't like I was drinking every day, you
Hmm.
know. But when we would go through, Germany or Shannon, Ireland, or row to Spain on our way back and forth to, Iraq, Afghanistan, I would party hard. And when we would party, but if I was out training or we were out on ops while deployed, I was good. I didn't feel the need where I was craving a drink
Hmm.
because I had focus, I had structure, and I had what I viewed was my identity. See, the big thing that I struggled with is knowing who I am.
Yeah,
Right? I
that's pretty
spent
common.
well, yeah, it sure is, and I spent years. I spent years identifying who I am with what I did in the military,
Man,
right?
you
And
you're
so
repeating exactly a lot of the things I talk about. is, this is what I do, not who I am, but a lot of folks, it gets wrapped up in one and the same.
Well, I'd never had anybody point out the difference.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's identify really who you are and show how that made you good at what you do, but that's not who you are. And I struggle with that. And
Hmm.
so I go to treatment the first time, and I finish that treatment. My wife picks me up from treatment, and we go out to have dinner to celebrate this amazing accomplishment of me staying sober for 28 days in a treatment center. And I order a drink, and she says, are you sure you should be doing that? And I said, yeah, it's okay. They taught me how to drink responsibly. The thing that's crazy is, like, I actually believe that. I
Sometimes it
believe,
works. The rare
well,
time, but it's really not how it works. Yeah.
right. Well, and I believed that about me. I believed that I didn't really have a problem. I just needed to get control of it. And
Hmm.
so that, drinking responsibly lasted about 3 weeks, and then I was drinking, around the clock again. I couldn't hold a job anymore. I would do a little bit of executive protection work, and then I would um, not re-up a contract, or I just would stop going to work. I never got fired from a job, but I would see that they're starting to get wise to me, and I just quit going. Um,
Yeah.
and so I started to turn up in detoxes more and more, and all this while, they still hadn't properly diagnosed my traumatic brain injury. Um, I'm going into the VA. They're trying to figure out what's wrong. They're telling my wife and me that this is my post-traumatic stress response. Um, my wife's arguing with them, like, no, I know his post-traumatic stress response. I know what that looks like for him. This is not post-traumatic stress. There's something wrong with him. She had been reading up a lot about it. And I remember the most scared I ever was never in a gunfight. It was never, facing my own mortality. The most scared I was is when I would go to my VA appointments and they would do more neuro tests on me. I would leave the VA, they still wouldn't know what was wrong, and I'd return to my car scared to death. And I'd sit in my car in the VA parking lot with a bottle of Jameson in one hand and a pistol in the other. Um, Not knowing what's wrong with me. The VA can't figure out what's wrong with me. Why am I still alive? And wanting it all to end,
Yeah.
and
That's
wishing I could do it. And
painful.
well, and the only reason I didn't blow my brains out sitting in that car is because I had developed a relationship with the sweet lady that was the parking lot attendant.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking, even as torn up as I was, I remember thinking, that lady's not going to find my body. I'm not going to do that to her. That's an
Hmm.
awful thing to do, is for her to come do her parking lot check. But I would sit there with a bottle in my hand, bouncing a pistol off my temple. And going back here for a second, I come from a long line of military. My we've got some of the I've got bayonets on my bookshelf back there from the Spanish American War, right? From
Wow.
LaBoons that have served. My grandfather, World War II veteran. He's a Bataan Death March survivor,
Oh, wow.
and prisoner of war for 3.5 years to the Japanese. And I remember my grandfather when I was little. We were pretty well shielded from a lot of those things. But as I got older,
Hmm.
um, more stories were shared with me about the things that he dealt with and the things that he went through. And I remember as I was going through my early struggles with post traumatic stress, undiagnosed traumatic brain injury, and all these things, I remember thinking, I love my granddad, but um, I don't want to die that way, man. So the day he died, he was a very bitter man. He was always kind to us grandchildren, but just a very now
Angry.
looking back again, yeah, angry. You could tell. And so I had that fueling me, and I was this like e- wound so tight like a piano string that's about to burst all the time. And my wife, we had moved back to Boston, Massachusetts, and she researched. There's this place. It's called the Red Sox Foundation, and It's a nonprofit. They work with the Red Sox, help fund it in conjunction with Massachusetts General Hospital, and it's free for veterans. And they have traumatic brain injury, neuropsychiatry, neuroscience and addiction, counseling, family program. They do all this stuff. And so she got me up there, and I was about halfway through my intake, and they were already like, "Yeah, okay, we're gonna finish this intake, and you're going um, straight to our neuropsychiatrist. We're gonna figure out that with the neurology team, we're gonna figure this out." And so they got me up to Brigham and Women's, an incredible um, team up there, and they hook me up to they do like 32 leads suction to your head, like glued to your head, and all these wires. You look like the
Well, I mean,
Predator. All these
you probably have a little easier than some. Maybe
I
you
had
had some
hair.
hair back then, or
I did. I did. I had hair back then. I hadn't quite given in to being bald yet. But they have all these wires coming off your head, and you're plugged into the wall, and so that they can monitor and
Mhm.
try to capture the neurological abnormality. And I was in there about 3 days, and they captured the first seizure, and that's when they were actually able to effectively diagnose me
Now, were
with a
you
seizure.
aware that you were having seizures before that, or was it just kind of like your brain
Nope.
sort like, hey, or would you wake up like kind of like, huh, what was that? I mean, was there some indication that you were tracking, or was it other people noticing?
It was my wife, because I would have no memory of these. Like one time we woke up, or she woke up, and I wasn't in bed, and she came to find me, and I was out. We were back in Boston. It was January. It was basically a blizzard outside, and I was outside in the parking lot. And I had two leashes and collar on one dog, nothing on the other dog. Thankfully, the dog that I didn't put a leash on was my service animal, so he was glued to my hip, and I'm wearing flip flops and no shirt out in the snow, and I have no I would have no memory of it. And in fact, she would take videos of it to show the VA, and I'm very childlike. I would just look at her and say, "Where are we?" And her parents worked at a local emergency room. She'd drive me up to the ER when I started to have these issues.
Yeah,
She'd say, we're in the car. We're gonna go see mom and dad." And I'm like, "Okay." 3 minutes later, "Where are we going?"
yeah.
She's like, "Oh, we're gonna go see my mom and dad." Just have no. And then they could last 3 hours. They could last 12 hours, and
Oh, wow.
I would
So
have
it
absolutely
wasn't a short period of time. It'd be
no.
pretty pretty lengthy.
Yep,
I can
very
see where
lengthy.
that caused problems at work. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Um, and so they were able to diagnose me with that
Wow.
traumatic brain injury, and I still had a lot of work to do with the post traumatic stress side, but they were able to get me properly medicated to get my seizures under control, because I'm managed through medication, but I still would have a lot of cognitive function and a lot of cognitive problems, right?
Hmm.
Like I would have the most basic, simple task to do to complete, and I just couldn't do it, right? Like there would be some days where you would ask me to get dressed and put my shoes on, and I would sit and look at my clothes. My wife would say, "Hey, come on, get dressed. We got to go." And I'd sit and stare at my clothes, and I know what to do. I know what you're telling me to do, and I can't do it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I started to have like some of my motor function was really poor. Like it was almost like paralysis, like and so I would pass like the reflex tests. They would do the
Hmm.
reflex tests on my hands and on my feet, and I would so my hands were processing that, but like I couldn't move. There would be periods of time where like I couldn't move my arm to pick up that drink and put it to my lips to take a drink. I started to have vision problems, like my vision would flutter. My hearing, yeah, I've got the tinnitus and everything, but also, the cognitive auditory processing disorder is real, right? Like if you don't get my attention, I don't care how loud you're talking behind me. I don't know that you're
Hmm.
that you're talking to me. And so there was some really challenging times, even not having seizures. Um, and so going through the appropriate therapies for that, getting some true neurological help. In the meantime, I'm getting in and getting some impressive clinical work doing. They've got some really impressive EMDR and in vivo therapies that they do up there that I was able to experience. I went through several different rounds of EMDR. And so my traumatic brain injury is being well treated at this point.
Hmm.
But still, I can't quit drinking. Right. And so and I think there are a lot of guys that probably struggle with substance abuse, they struggle with that stuff, and probably their mental health is a contributing factor. I think it's always a contributing factor. I think it's
Yeah.
probably the lead contributing factor for a lot of
The
guys. Maybe.
self-medication component.
Yep.
Yeah,
Um,
that's pretty significant comorbidity. That's
sure.
why they often don't try to even treat the neurology or the psychiatric or neuropsych issues until the drinking stopped because it masks so many of the symptoms.
Well, and I would have periods of time during this where I was sober. I'd go to detox and I'd stay generally sober for 3 or 4 months, and
Hmm.
then I'd start drinking again, and then I'd get sober and start drinking again, and back and forth. And so um, I was just kind of, it's like um, just screw up, rinse, repeat, screw up, rinse, repeat in every aspect of my life. And my wife, she had got me through the the most significant of the traumatic brain injury work, right? And through a lot of my post traumatic stress, and she got to a point where she was like, you know what, I don't, I was not ever the angry or the violent drunk. I was the drunk. I would shut myself in my office at home with a pistol on my desk and a drink in my hand, and she was scared to death that she was going to come home and I would blow my brains out. And we had only been married a few years, and she had been through this for years trying to get me right and get me squared away. and
Hmm.
and
That
um
must have been so tough on her.
well, I can't, I cannot imagine how scary that was for her. When we're drinking and when we're consumed in post-traumatic stress and all this, I'm only thinking about me. Oh, how rough my
Yeah.
life is, right? But the toll this takes on our families,
Oh,
right?
it's huge.
And I my the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is working with and working for an organization where I get to be there to support the families, because I didn't get to do that. I was awful, to
Hmm.
her. I was awful to her family. I was awful to my family. I really was a monster. And her last saving grace for me is she dropped me off at the psych ward of the VA hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, and filed for divorce. She
Oh,
said,
wow.
I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to sit here and watch you slowly kill yourself. I'm just not going to do it. And um, certainly didn't get sober then. That started the beginning of the end. I said some truly awful things to her. Um, Called her every name in
Lashing
the
out.
book. Yeah, called her every name in the book. How could you possibly do this to me, et cetera? And what I know today is that was all a response for me out of fear.
Hmm.
Um, the last saving grace she did for me is she paid off my car because she knew I was going to end up homeless. That way, at least I'd be able to be in my car. Um,
She sounds like an amazing woman who went as much as she possibly could before, she's like, God, I just can't do this anymore.
as far as I know, still is to this day. There was a few years there after I got sober where she maintained a security clearance, and so I would still have to get interviewed. And I'm sure her putting my name down on that, she's probably like, "Oh God, I hope he's sober right now."
Yeah.
Um,
So let's
in
talk
fact,
about that because you had what, five
yeah,
detoxes, a couple inpatient stays.
yeah.
What made it click for you that final time where you got sober, you stopped drinking, and really what throughout your struggles did you learn, would you share to others that are going through that?
We will be right back after this short break. When you serve your community, you deserve a team that has your back. At Coming Home Well and the Transitioning Warrior Outreach, we proudly partner with Big Frog Custom T-shirts and more of New Braunfels, Texas. As a veteran-owned local business, Big Frog delivers top-quality company-branded apparel, custom shirts, team apparel, or personalized gear with unmatched service. Support the business that truly supports our heroes. Visit bigfrognb.com today. Thanks for sticking with us. Now back to the episode.
So I don't know what it was about this particular day that made it different from any other day. I know that I had burned every bridge. I actually ended up in Oklahoma because the last family I have on earth that would answer my phone call was my auntie and my cousin that live in Norman, and I hadn't seen them in 25 years. They didn't know how bad I was. My cousin knew that I wasn't well, but she didn't know how bad it was. And so I just up one day I said, "Hey, I'm going to come see you guys." She was like, "Okay, yeah," excited. And I drove across the country in a blackout. Um, and I was in Oklahoma for about a week and a half, and it hit me one day. And again, I don't know the recovery program I work today. I'm a member of a 12-step fellowship, and what I know today is that even in my darkest moments, my higher power, I choose to call God will take shots at me, right? And for whatever reason, on that day, God decided to take a shot at me, and the thought I had is, if you don't stop this, you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And my next thought was, it's not going to be today, and it's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be in another 25 years, and you really are going to be completely and totally alone. And for the first time, I called the National Alcohol Hotline. They gave me a list of like 5 places in Oklahoma that take TRICARE. And so I started calling those places, and I ended up in
It
treatment.
sounds like
3 days.
Oklahoma. Yeah, 5 places.
Yeah, they take TRICARE. Some great treatment centers. And so I ended up in treatment. And, you know, I believe that because there's a lot of compounding factors, right? There's the post-traumatic stress, there's the lack of identity, there's the traumatic brain injury. There's all of those things compounding with the substance abuse. But the reality for me is that I'm not done until I'm done,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it doesn't matter if our families had the ability to love us out of alcoholism, to love us out of suicide attempts, to love us out of all the things. If that was possible, not a single veteran would ever commit suicide. Not a
Yeah.
single veteran would struggle with substance abuse because it's just not real, right? That our families and we've got incredible families that love us very, very much. But you know what? I was never going to hear it from my family, and I was not done until I was done. And I knew I was an alcoholic long before I was
Mm-hmm.
willing to admit it. But I had to try everything. I had to try, okay, I'm not going to drink liquor anymore. I'm only going to drink beer. Then I switched to, man, I'm not going to drink beer anymore. I'll drink wine. I'll try wine. And then
Mm-hmm.
I got on this weird thing about how it's just dark liquor.
The
It's my problem.
rationalizations.
Yeah, man. And I had to run out all those good ideas that somehow, some way,
Beer,
I would,
wine, brown
yep,
liquor. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Wow.
I had to get over this delusion that somehow, some way I would be able to control and enjoy my drinking.
Mm-hmm. Like
Because that
that
just
you
wasn't
still
real.
had to drink, but you could control it in another way.
Sure. I mean, I remember waking up one morning. This is how bad it was. I remember waking up one morning and I'm violently ill. And I'm giving up my morning offering, to the porcelain god there. And I remember thinking, this is not a hangover. I'm not sick because I drank too much. I'm sick because I haven't had enough to drink.
What kind of
If I
that thought process is so crazy.
Well, and my
But
next
that's the
thought,
nature of the disease.
that's the nature of alcoholism, right? And my next
Yeah.
thought was, if I just get down to 7-Eleven,
Mm-hmm.
I can get a couple of tall boys, take the edge off, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do because I got to stop this. But still, I couldn't. That's the thing I think our families what will never understand unless they're folks that struggle from alcoholism. And so, the families that are listening, just know that like this stopped being fun for your loved one years ago.
Yeah.
They're not doing this because it's fun anymore. They're doing it because they cannot stop. I could not, no matter how much I wanted to, no matter how much I tried, stop. My family could not love this out of me. They could not pray this out of me. That's just not the way this thing works. And so for
Especially
me,
with all the different morbidities, and
yeah,
it's not just alcoholism. That's the hard part. I think a lot of people
yeah,
don't get. Yes, alcoholism is horrible, terrible disease, but then you also have PTSD. Then you also have TBI. And then you also
Right.
have X, Y, and Z going on. So it becomes multifactorial. And it's not just, hey, we're going to deal with the alcohol. No, a lot of times you have to deal with the alcohol first in order to get everything else working and get that fixed. Because, hey,
Yeah.
what happens to an alcoholic when they stop drinking, especially the people that are drinking a lot? Seizures, and so how
Yep.
do you fix one without the other? Yeah, it's a huge challenge. And
Well, and every
alcohol is
comorbidity that
crazy.
it's wild, right? Because it's legal and it's absolute poison. I think, and sure, there are plenty of people. My family, all of my family. Can, well, my wife today is alcoholic. She's 15 years sober, but uh, the rest of my family, like they can drink just fine,
Oh
and
yeah.
like that doesn't, and they won't finish your beer, and I'm going. I just laughed today. I'm like, that's crazy. I know you're not an alcoholic because you're leaving half a beer sitting there. But
Right.
the thing that's so scary and risky about our warrior class folks are our veterans, active duty, our first responders, right? Police, law enforcement, fire, all
Hmm.
these folks. The thing that's so scary is that every comorbidity you add, it increases the risk for suicide,
Yep.
right? You got the post traumatic stress, then you add like traumatic brain injury and other injuries to it, right? Increases it. Post traumatic stress is high. Then you add, traumatic brain injury, other injuries to it. It's even higher. And then the reality is that most folks, when they choose to uh, choose to kill themselves, it's they're drunk or high doing it.
Yeah, when
And
their
so,
decision making is already super impaired.
yep. And so there's this huge gap, right? And that you're absolutely right. We got to treat what's the most immediate thing that's probably going to kill us, right? It's alcoholism or the drug addiction. Let's get that rocking and rolling and taken care of, and then get on to the others. But for me, just sobering me up wasn't enough,
No.
and just treating myself. It had to be a little bit. I needed a little bit of everything. I needed a place that would care for me on all of those levels, that knew and understood me well. Yep.
So there's a thing that you said. I read it. It was something along after the military, I lost my purpose. And then you found your new purpose, the warriors fighting the same mental battles I did. So for a
Yeah.
first responder or veteran that's listening now, it feels utterly purposeless. What's probably the next first step that they should take?
So that warrior that feels completely and totally purposeless. So I had to go through this exercise where I had to say, okay, I'm gonna put down rank, I'm gonna put down MOS, I'm gonna put down all this stuff, and I am going to make a list of what it is that makes me me,
Hmm.
what the character traits, the values I have, that I like about myself. And then I'm going to look and say, okay, all of these things made me really good at what I did. It made me a really good teammate. They made me a really good in a gunfight. They made me really effective in what I did.
Hmm.
And then let me shift my mindset to this is uh, who I am. That's what
Yeah.
I did. And so, what in my life now, where can I use those things that made me really good at what I did? Where can I use those to continue to be of service, right? And then staying out of my own way. If you had told me 10 years ago that I would be doing what I'm doing today, I'd have laughed in your face. Like, no way. That's I'm not gonna have that kind of wimpy job. I'm not gonna have that kind of, office job. I'm not gonna do any of that. I would have laughed at it because never in a million years.
That's so on point. Finding your identity or who you are, and then finding your tribe. That's the two
Yep.
ways I refer to it. And those are the two things I think most veterans have a huge challenge with if when they leave service, because everyone leaves service at some point. Sometimes it's when you want it to be, when you retire, or other times it's medical, or you served your enlistment and you just, did your first 4 years or 6 years or whatever it is you signed up for. You're gonna leave the service, but that tribe component of the people around you is so significant. And I don't think we put enough emphasis on that when
No, we
we're
don't.
in. Hey, the tribe is everybody that you're serving with at the time. And then just like when you got your duty 214 and they're like, good luck. And you're like, well, that's it? Yeah. everybody goes through that. It's like real all of a sudden. And
Right.
so how do you find that purpose? How do you find that tribe, your identity again? And for you, it took a meandering turn, didn't it? A bunch of meandering turns.
Yeah. Well, the first place for me, right? Because I could not. Now this is speaking of myself and my story. I could not separate what I did from who I am,
Hmm.
right? And so for me, I had to take some distance. I had to take some space from a lot of the warrior type folks, and I found my first piece of identity in a 12-step fellowship, right? Because you hit the nail on the head. The identity piece is important, right? Like if I'm sitting down with you and you're telling me the things that I need to do to change my life, I've got to know that you drank like I drank, that you abuse drugs like I abuse drugs. I've got to know that you burned your life to the ground the same way or similarly that I did for me to hear what you're telling me, right?
Hmm.
And so I had to identify with other alcoholics first. And then through that identity piece, I was able to understand who I am, and I started working in the industry, in the substance abuse treatment industry. I was about 10 months sober, and I got a call from the treatment center that I went to that offered me a job or offered me to come out and interview in the admissions department.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, admissions? What are you talking about? Like that's that's weird. And I remember talking to my sponsor in my 12-step program, and he was like, "Hey, how about you just do what's right in front of you and go talk to him?" So I did. And I started working in admissions, and I absolutely loved it.
Hmm.
An incredible opportunity, and
Because you could see yourself in those people, I bet.
because I can identify with those folks,
Yeah.
absolutely. When I'm talking to them on the phone and they're calling me and they're like, "Dude, I don't want to live this way anymore." I'm like, "I get it. I
Yeah.
remember it, and I know how heavy that phone is when you pick it up to ask for help. That phone weighs 1,000 pounds when
It's
you
a
pick it up to ask
huge
for
deal
help."
for the person calling, but it's, a Tuesday for the people on the other end.
Right.
And you got to recognize that. It's huge.
Yeah.
So
So I,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
That's right.
Oh, I was just, kind of carrying
So
on with
did
that. Is
you got the job, you went out there. What was the key difference with that setup, that place that sort of brought you over to the treatment side? Because I do want to talk about a Warrior's Heart and, sort of
Yeah.
how you evolved from be falling down drunk, figure states, all sorts of huge issues to where you are now, which is quite the amazing recovery, but also thriving. It's not just living, it's thriving. And I think that's
Right.
one of the things I really want folks to get from this whole message. We talked a lot about the horrible part,
Sure.
but it doesn't stay horrible.
Well, it's how do I transition from surviving to thriving? Yeah.
Hmm.
It's nail on the head, right? And like so many of us, right? The warrior class, us warrior folks, we all possess special skills and aptitudes. We're pretty good at what we do, usually, right? We all like to be the subject matter expert. I want to be tactically and technically proficient in my given skills and tasks, right? So
Hmm.
I quickly just I went all in. I got really good at admissions, and I became the admission director. And then I started doing business development. They were interviewing like MBAs and all these folks to uh, to start doing business development. And I was like, no way, nobody's gonna talk about this place like me because it saved my life. And so I started doing business development, and then became the director of operations, and I became chief operating officer for another organization. Um,
Hmm.
and I ended up at Warriors Hearts. Funny story. I got the opportunity. Um, I frequently have the opportunity to speak at conferences, industry conferences, and things. And I was speaking at one of these conferences, and I think I was talking about like revenue cycle management and as it relates to like TRICARE and the VA. Real exciting stuff,
That
right? Like
sounds like the most boring topic I
you're
think
gonna
I could have.
be, yeah, you'll be on the edge of your seat the whole time. Well, anyway, out in the audience is Josh Lannon, one of the founders for Warriors Heart. He's in the audience, and he comes up to me afterward, and we start talking, and we had a couple of different calls. I was trying to talk them through some things. getting to know him and Tom Spooner more. And then we stayed in touch off and on. Works on some different things, industry partners, and then I got a call 4 or 5 months ago um, from someone I knew that said, "Hey, Drew, I think there's an opportunity you might be interested in." And I said, "Yeah, I really doubt that because I gotten those calls before." And she said, "No, it's. Have you heard of Warrior's Heart?" And I was like, "Well, of course I've heard of Warrior's Heart. That is the premier warrior treatment program in the world. Yeah, I've heard of
Mm-hmm.
Warrior's Heart." And she said, "Well, they're looking for a COO." And I was like, "Yep, you're right. I'm interested. Let's
Yeah.
let's talk." And so went through the interview process. My wife and I flew down there because I told them, I said, "This is a family decision for me. This is very, very important." So I flew down there, and the alignment is just perfect, right? We talked. You hit the nail on the head. You talked a little bit ago about the identity piece, right? Uh, Working with an organization where I have the additional identity piece of not only the person in long-term recovery, but I also have the traumatic brain injury. I have the warrior history. I've got all of those different things, the alignment, and then you add that I've got the industry leadership experience. I absolutely love it. And there's something special at Warrior's Heart, man. I knew, and I told my wife when we flew down to Texas, because we went down to the Bandera campus. We got in, it was about 9 o'clock at night. They drove us out. And we didn't really do any touring or any talking that night. The driver drove us out. We stayed at one of the cabins on site, and we get out. We put our bags inside, and I'm standing out on the porch, and I look at my wife, and she goes, "You got that look? What's going on?" And I said, "This is it. Like you feel it in the ground
Mm-hmm.
uh, there at Warrior's Heart. It's incredibly special." And then at Warrior's Heart, it's here's why it matters, right? If you put a warrior in a group therapy circle with a civilian and you ask him or her to open up about his darkest moments, he shuts down. It's not because we don't want help. It's because the room doesn't feel safe. You
Yeah.
know, we built at Warrior's Heart, we built the room that feels safe. In the United States, we have a veteran suicide crisis in this country, and we keep trying to solve the warrior problem with civilian tools.
Yeah,
It's like,
I was thinking about that. The warrior to heal with other warriors rather than a, civilian rehab, which works great for people that are not warriors, that they're not dealing with those same things. And so that's becomes the modality that's used because it works for 90% of the people. The
right.
5 or 10% that are cops or military or dealing with an entirely different set of problems.
Yep.
Similar problems, but in a different manner. And opening up is totally different. So,
Well, and
what is Warrior's Heart and what do they do? I think we might have skipped the lead on that.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
is it? What is it? What does it do?
We're stepping away for a quick break to hear from V2M Veteran Magazine.
Looking for stories that truly matter to our military community? Discover V2M, the Veteran Magazine. Read online at v2mag.com.
We've got two campuses currently. We've got our Bandera, Texas campus, and we've got our Milford, Virginia, just outside of Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
Warrior's Heart really is the premier treatment program, co-occurring treatment program for the warrior class in the entire world. The warrior class are active duty service members, veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, first responders, right? Those are all our warrior class folks. The things that we struggle with are similar, right? And what it looks like is it's a full continuum of care. It's
Mm-hmm.
detox through outpatient. A warrior will come in, they'll detox. Our Bandera campus is over 500 acres. The Virginia campus is over 200 acres. They're going to
You
find
can't
what they're
walk
going to
down to
find.
the corner store. And
No, you can't.
yeah.
But what's even more important and what a warrior experiences, right, is a safe environment from the moment they set foot on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean is when they get there, they're going to drive through a gate with a gate guard to help us feel safe, right? It speaks our language. Everything that we do at Warrior's Heart is incredibly intentional to
Mm-hmm.
speak to that warrior to make them feel safe subconsciously before they even recognize that they feel safe consciously. It's speaking that unspoken psychological language. Uh, we're gonna support them through detox, right? They're gonna detox in our detox unit, and then they're gonna go into the residential treatment program. The residential treatment program is special, and here's why. It's the only treatment program I know of that every client, every warrior that comes in has two clinicians. They've got their primary clinician, their dual clinician that's a dual diagnosis. It's going to specifically focus on the moral injury, the behavioral therapies, the trauma processing, and then they've got their substance abuse clinician that's going to focus on the substance abuse piece. And they're going to get multiple one-on-ones every week. They're going to get their caseload groups. During their elective times, one of the things that's really special that we try to do at Warriors Heart is we try to either get warriors back into things that they used to enjoy to give them a healthy outlet, or introduce them to things that they never have experienced before and try to help them find a new hobby. We've got wood shop where they can make so that some of the warriors art is incredible, both at the art
Yeah.
studio with some of the warriors art they create. It's online. You can go to the website and you can see some of the warrior art.
I've seen
There's
some. I was laughing when you were talking about it because I'm like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And
I mean,
there was a
I
phrase
could.
somebody told me the other day, and I've never really thought about it. It was talking about schools. And there's either country club schools where they really do great in tennis and baseball, and then there's the other schools which do great in football. And I was like, huh, I didn't realize that most play, because just growing up in a different environment, most people don't go play golf. They don't do hobbies like that, tennis and golf. And I was thinking about it as these are lifelong things that people can go do, even if you're not like super healthy. And I
Yeah.
was like, wood shop and, like all these things that you can do as you get older, even, pickleball and all this stuff. And I was thinking about it in that context of, huh, it's interesting that not everybody's coming from the same place, but can go do things like wood shop, go do, hobbies. So do you have to have a substance abuse problem to start with Warrior's Heart? Or is there, because not everybody does, but a lot of people with TBIs and PTSD and, other issues, a lot of those same co-committing issues, but not necessarily a substance abuse problem. But there's a lot to do.
Right. So we are substance abuse primary. We're
Hmm.
co-occurring, but we are substance abuse primary. So if somebody does not have a substance abuse issue, or struggling with substance abuse, they'll call us and we'll help them get referred to mental health. Right. Like we
Hmm.
partner with Avalon Action Alliance, and they have some incredible mental health and traumatic brain injury programs for folks that don't have substance abuse. Right.
Right.
But for our folks, they're going to get all of the therapy. We have a canine program where we've got dog kennels, right? And we've got
Hmm.
our kennel master has decades of experience training dogs. And so when a warrior enters the Warrior Canine Academy, what ends up with is they leave the program with a therapy dog that's specifically trained for them, that they've participated in the training with, that they take with them when they
How
go.
long do people participate in the program?
So it's 42 days residential
Hmm.
treatment. And then we have our follow-on PHP and sober living program that'll be an additional 8 weeks, and then IOP that's usually around 6 weeks. So, when a warrior's ready and able, we've got their first 5 to 6 months of care covered, and then they're welcome to stay in sober living. They don't have to leave when they're done with PHP.
Hmm.
So we've got that, their first 5 6 months of care covered
Already
as long as
locked
they come
in.
to us and willing, right? And that's really when, because to your earlier point, right, we've got to get them sober first. So many of our warriors that struggle with uh, traumatic brain injuries, once we get them sober and they complete the residential program, we love getting them into our TMS program, to where they go into our sober living and we really start focusing on the traumatic brain injury, what's going on with them, and how can we get them well and get them right. And if you want to talk
Hmm.
about something, or a therapy, an intervention that will improve the quality of life for a person struggling with a traumatic brain injury, there's nothing like TMS and MERT.
Yeah.
It's absolutely unbelievable the way it works. It's one of those, like, when you read about it or somebody tells you about it, you're like, ah, that's hokey, man. That sounds stupid. That's not going to work. And then you do, you participate, you have it, and it's unbelievable.
Well,
The
when
way
I
it
first
works.
heard about EMDR, I'm like, that sounds like the
Oh
biggest
yeah,
bunch of hokum I've ever heard.
yeah.
But the science doesn't
Keep
lie. I mean,
keep your
that's the reality. But the
yeah.
first
Keep
time
your
somebody told me about it, I was like, sounds like the biggest bunch of bullshit that I've ever heard. And but I've the science doesn't lie. People, it's amazing.
yeah. I remember I said, keep that Jedi mind trick shit to
Yeah,
yourself,
these aren't the
and
droids you're looking for. Look at the
with
lights.
the MDR. And I had an old mentor of mine, an old Master Chief, that looked at me and he was like, when did you get to be such a tough guy that you're not only tougher than everybody else, but you're smarter than them too? How about you shut up and go do what these 15-pound brains are telling you to do? And so I did. It was unbelievable. All of those things. The
Hmm.
weirder it sounds, my experience is the weirder it sounds, the better it is.
Yeah.
It really is cool.
And there's so many outstanding research programs going on. So once you get sober, and you can actually participate and get those things going, where you don't have all these co-committing issues going on. There's so many great things of research going on. So folks, I just say go whatever you knew 5 years ago, it's totally different now. Things are changing and the science is evolving so quickly. AMDR, ketamine therapies, like all sorts of stuff that are ongoing to help with pain, to help with brain injuries. It's really going. One of the questions I get a lot is when you have veteran first responders, all these groups coming together, and you have a group session, because you don't have those instant bonds. Like if you're military, you always see it, even at the VA. Doesn't matter what uh, era somebody served in, they start chatting. But then you have firefighters, first responders, paramedics. Is there ever any, I don't know how to put it, uh, who had it worse, or sort of the measuring of the other folks when they first start, when they first are forming a group?
The measuring, that's a delicate way to.
Yeah, there's terms I was going to use, but
Sure. No, 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 no,
the
no. I'm
hierarchy
tracking.
of
Sure.
of badness.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't happen, but I'm going to say we do a really good job of keeping that at bay and keeping it from happening, right?
Hmm.
Because the reason is when a warrior walks through our gate, right, comes on our campus, the person sitting across from them has worn the uniform, run the call, carried the badge. There's no translation required. And that changes everything about how the healing lands from the very first day.
Hmm.
So a warrior knows when they come in, like, hey, buddy, you're safe here. The reason we do that, the reason we do that bristly chest and we peacock about who's cooler and who's not, it's a fear response. I'm scared. I need you to know how cool I was. I need you to know about the ops I ran, about these cool guys, scary schools and badges and medals. I need you to know about all that stuff because if you either admire me or you fear me, you'll leave me alone. I'll get the response out of you I need to validate the way I feel, and then I will be okay. Right. If
And
you
that's
address that
addressed
head
at the
on,
very beginning.
it's addressed by focusing on the solution.
Yeah.
We don't go and say, hey guys, don't have a piston match on who was cooler. We go and sit them down and say, hey man, you're safe, right? It's okay. You don't have to be that anymore. We're all safe here.
Hmm.
Everything's good here. And you know, it's refreshing how little of that there is. Because listen, I did the VA domiciliary tour. I know what that's like, right? It's
Hmm.
rough out there, and I understand exactly what you're talking about. And the way but 100% every single time, that's a fear response. When I engage in that type of behavior, it's because I'm scared of something. And so typically for me anyway, it's I'm scared you'll get too close to me, or I'm scared you won't get close enough.
Yeah. Or you won't really value my badness, the things going
Yeah.
on that are bad, because
Yep.
Everybody's different, and I'll be honest, most military folks, you have lots of boredom and a little bit of craziness, but cops and paramedics are dealing with dead bodies and like some horrible, horrible things that we
Right.
don't really process that often as military
Mhm.
folks. And so that dichotomy of, I think I understand it, but you really don't until you've walked in their shoes. And that's why I wanted to address that question, because we have a large response of military and first responders that I
Yeah.
want to know about your program and that it's going to be okay and that you're fully accepted. And hey, if you're having a substance abuse issue, Warriors Heart is the place to go start getting some help and get on that right track. So
You know, what's
go ahead.
really cool, if I can, real quick, what's really cool at Warriors Heart is typically what we see is the opposite, right?
Mhm.
And I saw this just a couple of weeks ago. We were engaged in some training, and because that's the way we pitch to the Warriors. You're coming into training. You're not coming into rehab. You're coming into training, right? And what we end up seeing the most is they sit and they talk and they communicate and they share stories about what's going on. A lot of the times, what ends up happening is, oh my God, dude, I can't believe that you went through that. I'm really sorry. How can I support you? And the
Yeah.
opposite. We had some officers that were involved. I don't know if you remember, but in the news about a year ago, there were some pretty terrible floods in Texas,
Hmm.
and it flooded through a camp, and a bunch of children drowned.
Yeah, like over a dozen.
Yeah, well, we had a handful of officers with us that were some of the first on the scene that were pulling those children out of the water,
Yeah. And
and to
there's nothing worse
see,
than children,
right,
things happening to kids.
and to see the rest of the warrior community um, lift those guys up and secure them while they processed and grieved, and
Hmm.
for the first time allowed themselves to do that. It's pretty special. So no, we don't have the measuring and the piss and match contest really at Warriors Heart. What we have is because we set the tone from the beginning. You know, you don't have to do that. That's not necessary. You're safe, man. Like, you drove through
Hmm.
the gate, right? You know you're on safe, sacred ground here, and we're here to train. Let's get after it.
So, how do people get in touch with Warriors Heart? How do they get that process started if they think they need some help? Or maybe their family members think that they need some help, which is just as often the case.
The family members need some help. Well, that's the way it was for me for years. Having to uh, to reach out. They're reaching out on my behalf. It wasn't until I was ready that finally made a difference. But so our website, warriorsheart.com, is a good place to start. We also have all of our social medias. Reach out on any of our social medias, website. You can call our phone through the website there. Hit the
Hmm.
call now button, and it'll take you directly to admissions advocates. Even if you just want to get a little bit more information, you can do that. Absolutely, give a call. Um, and if there's anybody on here, I always do this on podcasts, and I don't care. But I'll list my personal cell phone number, because if it'll save one life, and there's one person that's sitting there on the edge of that, you give me a call. Um, 405 and I'm willing to put that out there in the public, because if it saves one life and helps one person, then it's worth it to me to be that open.
I'm going to put the website in the show notes. So if you're listening as you're driving, uh, don't worry about writing it down, but you're going to have to re-listen to get his phone number if you want it. Try to help a little bit. Otherwise, everything gets searched and indexed on the internets. When we don't want Drew to get a billion calls from every spammer, because I get enough spam calls as it is. I'm sure you do as well. We want those real calls to be able to get through. Drew, I've asked you a lot about yourself, your journey, Warrior's Heart. What should I have asked? I'm just thinking of what a great organization, what a radical transformation and recognition of where you were, what didn't go well, how you were able to transition, and then I think the biggest, most interesting part about the entire story is where they called 10 months after you were a patient going, "Hey, you want a job?" That must have been a little surprising. Is that something they do often?
We love hiring alumni. We love hiring folks in recovery, right? Because like we talked about before, it's that identity piece.
Hmm.
Um,
Nobody
it's
could tell the story better than somebody who's been there.
Well, and that person, that phone weighs 1 million pounds. One of the biggest barriers isn't, willingness, it's awareness, right? So when I
Hmm.
finally become aware of my own problems and I'm willing to pick up the phone, I want to know that the person I talk to gets it, right? And so that's why we like to grab our own, the identity piece, that can communicate with that person on the other end of the phone and knows what it's like to walk
When they
that
actually
path.
are ready, when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yep.
How
Yep.
how important is it? And I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. For the person that is wanting to get help to really want to get the help, because a lot of people go to rehabs because they're kind of forced to, or the judge says so, or their spouse or family members, and they go to rehab, they go to inpatient, they do all these treatments, but they don't stick until the person that is abusing whatever they're abusing says, "God, I really don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know how to stop." How important is that to really getting well?
I'm not sure I'm following your question. So how important?
Until you're ready, until you were
Yeah, yeah,
ready, you could have done 100 treatments until
sure.
you were ready. The person that is calling, if you're out there, you're listening and you're going, "Yeah, I don't think I really have a problem, but I should probably get some treatment, so I can keep my drinking under control." Or, there's a lot of lies people tell themselves in order to get that going. But the impetus for successful treatment is that internal motivation, right?
Right.
So, how do you know when somebody's ready? How does an individual know that they are then ready to do what is needed?
When you are, when you get to a point where you are more scared to continue doing what you're doing than you are of what you're going to have to do to change.
That's a good answer. Yeah.
For a lot of years, I was terrified of the things I was going to have to change in my life. I was terrified. How do I live sober? I don't know how to do that.
Hmm.
Um, all of those things scared me to death. And so I continued on what I was going to do. And also, I was scared of the thoughts and things that raced through my head. So when I get to a point where I'm more scared and sick of continuing on the way I'm continuing on than I am
Hmm.
about what I'll have to do to change, that's when, the magic of recovery can happen. Because for me, just an endless loop. It's like being in the worst, most hellacious version of Groundhog Day imaginable. Um, but when I finally get to the point where it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired, right? And that's not to say, if your loved one and you're listening to this, if your loved one isn't there yet, that's not to say that getting them into a treatment center can't still help, right? It can. I don't know what it's going to take any individual to get sober. I have a pretty good idea, and I hope for them, but you know, I've seen a lot of folks come into treatment because their wife or their mom or their husband or somebody told them you need to get some help. I've seen them come into treatment for that reason, and I've seen
Yeah.
them leave a completely transformed person. So, whatever gets them in the door, be honest
Yeah.
with you, and gives us a crack at them, can make a difference.
No, that's a really great answer because people are so weird and different. So I'm going to jump a little bit.
Mhm.
Alcohol has been traditionally the military and first responder drug of choice because you can do it because it's legal. But marijuana has become legal in like 30, 40 states. I don't even know how many anymore. How much are you seeing with polysubstance with marijuana and alcohol or other drugs that you're more on the front lines of treating these things? I'm just curious how much that's showing up.
The vast majority are polysubstance.
Okay.
Um, there
I
aren't
figured
too
as much,
many.
but
Well, like me, if you had told me when I'm at the spirit tip of freedom that I would be a full blown drug addict, I'd have punched you in the face.
yeah.
Like, dude, I'm not a loser, right? But then you fast forward to my drinking career, and I have got to find new ways to import substances into my body and new substances to get into my body
Mm-hmm.
because alcohol is not enough anymore.
Mm.
So then I'm mixing alcohol with my pills, and then I'm taking more pills, and then I learn how to start cooking and shooting pills. I remember my first time in treatment, looking at the drug addicts in that treatment center, thinking, "You bunch of losers! Can't you get your lives together? Like you
Yeah.
guys are bums." You fast forward a year and a half, and I'm sitting on a friend's bathtub with a needle in my arm, going, "Oh my God, how did I get here?"
Yeah. It's pretty
Right?
quick, isn't it?
There aren't too many just pure alcoholics anymore. You
Okay.
know what we're starting to see even more of an uptick on is kratom and 7-OH. Um,
Really?
it is really, really scary, and the hallucinations and the detox from that is terrifying. To
Mm-hmm.
watch it's scary to watch somebody go through it. I can't
Yeah.
imagine what it's like to actually go through it yourself. So, man, it's bad stuff.
Yeah, I've read all about kratom. I see it all over. It used to be much more prevalent. I think that it's starting to get a little more regulated, but yeah, that's some scary stuff. The same thing with the synthetic THCs, and you'd
Yeah.
see like, golly, that is some crazy stuff. But people use it, and people do bad things to their bodies with it, which is crazy to me. I mean, you don't know what it is half the time. Yeah, if you're dealing with meth or coke or alcohol, you know what that is generally, but these synthetics are just kind of crazy. So, Drew, we've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything that you want to add that people should know about yourself, your story, Warrior's Heart, or anything else?
um, yeah, what I'll say to the families is uh, it's not because you're not loving them right and you're not praying hard enough for them. Your loved one is sick. They're not bad.
Hmm.
There are terminally ill, not hopelessly bad. Right. The good news is there's help. Right. There's help out there. To the warriors listening, uh, I'm going to tell you the toughest thing, the bravest thing, the most courageous thing you could possibly do. And it sounds so cliche. And before I got sober, I remember sitting and listening to podcasts like this, and I'd hear somebody say this, and I'd be like, this chump has no idea what he's talking about. And I'm going to say it. Asking for help is the bravest, strongest thing and the most challenging thing you will ever do.
Hmm.
Right. But I'm going to tell you, it's the most rewarding thing I have ever done. Right. When I first got sober, I made a pact to myself. I said, I've done a lot of great things for God and country. I've been on some incredible ops. I've been to some incredible schools. Very, very exciting life. And also, I retired. If that is the highlight of my life, then what the hell am I doing for the next 40 years?
Yeah, that's a
Right.
great way. That's a wonderful perspective. We serve in the military from, relatively young age, and you retire 40s at most, maybe 50s if you're a general. That isn't very old. That
Right.
especially if you join at 17, you can retire at 37. That isn't retirement age. That's just the beginning of your next career. It sets you up amazingly with benefits and everything else, but if that's all you're gonna do, that sort of changes the entire dynamic and perspective of what you're gonna go do. Folks, we've been talking with Drew LaBoon. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Warrior's Heart. Go check them out. If you have family members, friends, buddies you served with that are having substance abuse issues, or you're having substance abuse issues, go check them out. They can do referrals, they do a lot of treatment, they do some amazing things, and it is one of the best, as Drew was saying, the premier place to treat warriors dealing with these issues. And Drew, thank you so much for telling us your story, because it takes a lot of courage to go and sort of, bare your soul about, things that weren't really going well, but also for the wonderful things you're doing for the entire warrior community with Warrior's Heart. Thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on Coming Home Well with Dr. Tyler Pieron. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well, this is Coming Home Well.